Let's talk about a net of networks. That's why DHL Supply Chain Mexico integrates to its fleet these multi-temperature bands. This is a solution that allows us to transport in the same unit products that have tempered control products and others, which give a better efficiency for our customers and also less emissions and a better solution. Let's talk about a net of networks. Good afternoon. We are back in DHL Transportation Forum 2021. My name is Claudia Marquez, Senior Manager of Solution Design in DHL Supply Chain Mexico. For those who are just joining us, let me tell you that you have missed very interesting talks, but don't worry because tomorrow we will keep on having excellent sessions and we recommend you to participate. We love to have you here with us, and we are about to close the second day of activities in our DHL Transportation Forum. But this session will be great. And it's true, time has run by so fast having so interesting sessions. And of course, I have Sergio here with me in the session too.
Absolutely agree with you, Claudia. The day went through very quickly. My name is Sergio Morales, business developer in DHL Supply Chain. Today, let me tell you, we have an excellent panel to wrap up today. This will captivate everyone involved in regulation and norms. First, we want to remind you that in our virtual broadcast, all conferences can be followed in 3 languages: Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Click on your preferred language, you can see it at the bottom of your screen.
And once again, we invite you to share on social media this experience. All opinions are welcomed. Please, we recommend that if you're going to use social networks, you can use hashtag DHLTF2021 to follow your conversations. And
it is a pleasure for me to present to you the next session, Changes in Regulations of Transportation in Mexico. This is a very important subject that demands a lot of attention and follow-up on behalf of the different stakeholders in the sector.
To talk about this subject, we have Enrique González Muñoz, who is president of Canacar and is also a founder and CEO of Express MG. Enrique founded the Innovative Center in Auto Transport and also vice president of several Concamin groups. Welcome, Enrique.
Welcome, Enrique. And in the panel, we also have Ruben Hernandez, National Coordinator in Fiscal Matters in Canacar. He has more than 12 years of experience in fiscal matters and social security in our sector, participating in several levels of the executive and, legislative powers in transportation. Welcome, Ruben. It is a pleasure to have you here.
And to moderate this panel, we have Alejandro Echeverria, who is a leader of operations in transport in DHL Supply Chain Latin America. Welcome, Alex. This panel will captivate all our participants.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Sergio. It is an honor for me to lead this panel. I want to thank you, Enrique, for being here with us. Ruben, thank you a lot for being here today. I think this will be quite an interesting panel. Given the relevance of the change we will be talking about, the complement and CFDI. A lot to talk about. There is a rule that is helping us with transportation lines, and the owners of the load need to have a CFDI of inbound and outbound when transporting a merchandise from point A to point B, and it poses many operational challenges, many fiscal challenges as well, we can say, to many of the companies and users of the sector. Just to give you some context, we know this is a rule that came about in December last year, 2020, with certain dates defined for implementation. We wanted to start in June, then October, and most recently we have the agreement to start trials in December. Having put this in the discussion table, Enrique, I would like for you to help us, the ones here in the panel, to understand what we are talking about. What is this rule that SAT have implemented, have asked us to carry out tests in December, and January 2022 we need to have it well settled down. What is this about?
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. And it's very important that we start to specify that since this norm came out, we are looking for a friendly approach to it. I think it was like an over-regulation to the service that we've been given. But as we approached the authorities to modify it in the first place, and let me tell you that we never wanted it to go away, just modified it, but they told us that the spirit behind this norm was to control the merchandise that go by our country. So we needed to find a way to do it. And considering the situation that carriers have lived these last years, we know that we just had a pandemic and we're having challenges. Transportation is an essential industry, and the industries that were considered non-essential and didn't have activities make it that transportation wasn't at full capacity. It wasn't operating as much, mostly last year. So there is like some will of not changing, and Conacar said we want this rule and we want better control, but we had to tell the carriers that it was a necessary norm to control the vehicles. And when we were talking with Romendo Aranda, he told us that the problem of robbery to transport in Mexico is that the merchandise that they are stealing was turned legal when after it was robbed, and we thought The CFDI of Traslado, which is a taxable form, it was to close that gap so merchandise can have a legitimate source. So we considered it was a good measurement, but the problem that we faced is that after considering the 520 ways of transportation, just terrestrial, plus other means of transportation like by sea or by air, we wanted to look for ways for this to work, but avoiding having so much paperwork in the transportation here in Mexico.
Essentially, what are the oversight bodies looking for with this rule? We feel like it is mainly controlling counterfeit and smuggling, piracy, and somehow it favors formality in our sector and in the industry in general. Let us repeat it. We're cross-cutting in all the industry. If there is informality, that affects us to a great extent. That is the reason why it is so important to execute this rule. But from here to the work table that will be conducted in November, let us remember that in November we will have a test period, and it will be compulsory after December. That's why we have to work on this test to see how to do things. First of all, to make sure that the users of the transportation become sensitive that these came here to stay. And on the other hand, for authority to find friendlier ways in order not to fall into excessive control and too much red tape that could end up being a more convoluted process. So we need to look for something compatible to the measure. Again, we are not opposing it. However, we need a friendlier way, which is what we will be working on for the next tables. Thank you, Enrique. Ruben, on the tax point of view, the fiscal point of view, what are the impacts of this rule? What is its aim? I mean, what does the oversight body is looking at with this, and what impacts are we going to have that we should have in SCT in highways?
Well, to begin with, we need to tell the history of this rule. It's not as new as you might think. This rule, prior to the reform it had in 2020, it was focused in transportation of payload. What happened with this rule after that? More ways of transportations were added, also other parties like intermediaries, for instance, also includes the owners. And what's the impact? On the fiscal point of view, we need to consider that the CFDI has the characteristic of sealing in time the operations that a taxpayer has. Let's not lose aim of that. In addition to that, let's consider that for transportation, the ruling body is the Secretary of Transportation and Communications. So we're having two situations that will be fulfilled at the same time. First of all is like the delivery of the merchandise. First of all, authorities intervene in that because they supervise, they oversee these. And it's also like the National Guard, the external commerce authorities, they verify the documentation. And in the transportation, that is called the bill of lading. And with this should fulfill the fiscal requirements. These requirements come from the authorization that the SAT has with the fiscal code of the country. It gives the SAT the ability to certify this kind of documents. So all the carriers that deliver that service and all the users that are giving their loads to them and their payload, they are obliged to document these travels with a bill of lading that fulfill the characteristics of this Rule 2791 and complies with the bill of lading.
So the units then have to follow the roadmap. They need to start the service with the CFDI with the complement of bill of loading. They could not go out into the road without them. Given this particularity and considering what Ruben and Enrique say, given the requirements, this means having availability in transportation companies perhaps 24/7. What you are planning to load at night at a certain hour, I am planning to load a number of crates and pallets or certain meters, but that could vary at the moment of execution. So this means having some sort of mechanism so that the unit can go out into the road with the CFDI and with the bill of loading. Putting things in context and considering that around 55% of the transportation supply we have in Mexico comes from man to truck and the little company, what challenges will the compliance of the rule will pose for them, Enrique?
I think that something that we saw very happily last Friday was just like to kick the problem further away, but it's not getting rid of the problem anyway. We were having a continuous activity behind this, and there was a request we put in and that to issue a CFDI should be delayed until finalizing the service. So we started working in something different. And to use like simple words, let's say that we are talking about a taxi meter, that the CFDI is issued with an initial cost of operation and all the variables that can happen throughout the delivery, for instance, a bigger volume that's being loaded or time that is spent. And that concludes when we close our bill of lading, and that contabilizes all the additionals on the service. So this, I think, embraces all the interest of the carriers, regardless if they are small, medium, large. And something that we'll look after is that these little businesses that represent or that deliver 55% of the whole cargo. And there is a big let's talk about the small players here, the ones who have one or two trucks. How will they do to control this if many times they issue their own bill of loading and they load, for instance, agriculture products? How will they do this? The important work tables that we'll have from here until December and that will come to vigor in January 2022, we should consider all this time to see what's going on with these things like temporary importations. Things are happening at ports. We need to keep on working on this, and the partners in CONACAR has expressed their concern to us so we can present that to the authorities. With all due respect, I think that when the authorities put these rules in play, didn't consider some things that now we are telling them, and now they are looking at this for the first time. We don't want like the solution to be worse than the illness.
And that is quite an interesting point. Bulk loads. CFDI and the bill of loading has very specific data that we need to double check. For example, the weight, the volume, the amount, the amount of articles, the description of the articles as well, the items as well. But when talking about bulk, we definitely don't know how much we are loading in volume, in weight, or in liters. So this will pose a challenge for the carriers. The infrastructure of the sector today, transportation companies in Mexico, are they prepared to provide this service? I mean, creating the CFDI in real time, the moment we need it, as we are loading, Ruben and Enrique.
Well, we are definitely starting a process of digitalization of transport service. For us, this regulation is not as new as for other means of transportation. For us, we have experience. And maybe it's convenient to mention that around 2013 or 2012, the fiscal authorities wanted already to turn this bill of loading into a digital format. Let's remember that in 2014 the CFDA became mandatory. And what happened back then in the management that Canacar made with the SAT and with the Secretariat of Communication and Transportation, we draw the picture of how these services work, and I can like summarize that we identified three aspects that back then made this project a project that today is more consolidated. That the bill of loading should be a CFDI. And first of all, it has to do with internet availability, and also like the availability of the information to fill in a CFDI. Let's remember that in order to issue a CFDI, you need to have the information prior to issue, to the moment of issue. And other thing is just strictly operative. Within transportation, we have several services, and these services are very different from each other. It's not the same a consolidated payload or managing money in cash or maybe furniture. So we are talking about several segments that have their own ways of delivering the service. So back then, this made it easier to make a document, this bill of loading, in a paper manner, and that is changing. So it's very interesting this that you're mentioning, and what you are telling us, Ruben, is that 7 years ago in 2014, when it became mandatory to use CFDIs, these challenges already existed. And I see the same challenges today in terms of internet availability in the country, also availability of the information prior of loading the cargo, and also challenges in operations to execute all this. So what has changed today in the work tables that you're having now with the control parties? What do you talk about? What's different in the market? What are you seeing that is leading us to make these, like that you need to have all the information prior to the moment of loading the cargo, and all this information that would be uploaded to the organism of control? What's different?
Just like Ruben specified, something very valuable is that in Mexico there are many transportation companies, and this universe of 100% helps serve the market. We don't have more or less. Fortunately, we have a heterogeneous transportation means in Mexico. Many companies have international standards, and I don't want to talk about the largest ones. There are good small companies with good standards that not even the large ones have. I think in one way or another, technology became more compulsory. The pandemic taught us something, and that was using other systems. Just look at how we're connected today. Everything was in person. Today is virtual. It came here to stay. However, we have to capitalize on what we are learning. Finally, our field of action in Mexico, from the from the north to the south, there is no coverage of no internet coverage all over the republic. What will happen for agricultural public products coming from Chiapas if you don't have the coverage for the products coming out from the field? Complementing what Ruben was saying, back in 2013, 2014, we didn't have enough scenarios to perform such actions of oversight. Today, yes, they exist, but not completely, at least not for the full support of the supply, transportation supply, although it is quite heterogeneous.
Thank you, Enrique and Ruben. You, in these work tables that you've had, I know that you've talked a lot with the organisms of control and other companies. And in terms of what this norm is asking for and what you've been working in these work tables, the responsibility, the liability of the owner of the cargo, and also the liability of the carrier, the liability of a logistic operator. What is this liability according to the norm, and what have you worked in these tables?
Well, as a matter of fact, all sectors in all modalities of transportation represented through these organizations and chambers, and also the users. Users are taking participation in this conversation with authorities that is never ending. The extension was already given, but we're not anywhere near the end. What we are manufacturing here, what we are creating, is some sort of clarification when it comes to the point of view of the rule involving owners, intermediaries, and service deliverers. The liability has to be incredibly clear, not just from the transporter, because we usually think about the liability of the carrier. Of course, we have our own liability, we're responsible for something, but now we have to credit that we are legally delivering the service of transportation. However, the users also are liable here when it comes to the payload transported. This is quite a sensitive point, because at the end of the day, the bill of loading includes a series of data that, should they be analyzed, we would say that around 80% of inputs or the data for the correct filling out of the bill of loading are for the user. So the user is responsible to credit the legality of operations or the ownership of the commodity, because a transporter could be asked for this information, yes, but if at any situation the transporter cannot testify that they went through the oversight body of moving around illegal merchandise, at least they will be bothered with having to clarify it. You just mentioned three main protagonists here, three stakeholders: the owner of the payload, the line of transportation, and the logistics operator, to put it one way, or as you said, an intermediary. In layman terms, who issues what? We're talking about a CFDI, a bill of loading, the stakeholders in the chain. Who issues what, Ruben?
Well, definitely this bill of loading is attached to a CFDI. Let's remember the CFDI has like a general part and what is called complements. These complements are classified by SAT for each different activity. So for those transporting payload should include this complement within the CFDI. What does this mean? The owner, if the owner transports the merchandise with his own vehicles, he should issue a CFDI with the type of transport. Let's remember there are different types of CFDIs in this guy transport, and you add the bill of loading complement. And in the other way, who is delivering the service? If the owner doesn't deliver the merchandise by his own means and hires a carrier, it should be the carrier that issues the CFDI as an income, as an invoice, with the information of the bill of loading. So the one that is in the middle of all this will be the intermediary, the carrier. They are not obliged to issue a CFDI type transport with the bill of loading complement because they are not delivering that service. If they do, if they transport a part of this way by their own means, they should, but otherwise there's no obligation.
Thank you, Ruben. I think it is a lot clearer now that you put it this in this way. But there is a vast amount of information that will be moved about in via email interfaces, and the best scenario, an Excel spreadsheet, a phone call. Again, like you said, Enrique, depending on the size of the company and the infrastructure that they have. So if today security poses a challenge in highways, and I would like to know, what do you think about the challenge that it represents, being in the road with such sensitive and detailed information at the hands of an operator who will have the bill of loading, or an analyst who will do the CFDI? How can we even reckon the impact of the flow of information in such an open manner in security terms?
I think that something to keep in mind is that we should consider we are one of the most dangerous countries in highways, top 3 with Brazil and South Africa. So we have taken some measures to attack this, to tackle this, and something that we are seeing, sadly, is that many times the criminals, when they are looking after 3 trucks, let's say, they go after the one that is more valuable. So this is something that they are organized crime that can affect us a lot. And we have talked a lot about this. They have told me, like, yeah, they stopped the truck and they were wrong because they said I was transporting diesel, but it was just gas when transporting products, right? And we should be like very careful with specific and hard information. We should like come to the authorities and declare like the truth with everything that we are delivering, but without having the risk of the person who is delivering this. Many times the driver is in danger if they are traveling with high cost products. So we should not like lie with the kind of assets we're transporting. We're just delivering a service, and we say whoever is hiring me should declare the merchandise that they are sending, and they cannot declare something different to me. So we need to make this very clear. The right product should be declared, and always using the safety measurements to avoid problems in the highways.
Do you think this is an even ground for everyone, this rule? I think that the clearest objective would be seen at the end. It would be tackling informality, which is an incredibly big problem in Mexico. There is a high index of informality, and of course, what does informality mean? It means products can be transported illegally, or industries that, due to any sort of situations like tax evasions, are not doing transportation correctly. So the end result we want to have is tackling informality. The problem and the hard way is what we're doing to achieve this result. Thank you, Enrique. Ruben, you said a few minutes ago precisely about all the information the CFDI and the bill of loading should include, and the challenges that having this information in real time poses for the unit to go out in the road with this CFDI and the bill of loading. You told us about the implications, and we don't even have this information beforehand. You have talked to the regulatory body, the oversight body, about this, so I would like to know what's in the discussion table for that.
Well, during these work tables, many things have been said, and it turned from Q&A to proposals. And all this information that in the end, as you said, represents a challenge for security, I think that each of us has a different situation about their liability. I mean, the information that includes the bill of loading complement, one of these is like the merchandise that you are transporting, as he said. So, talking about security, like the inner security, the relation between the owner and the carrier, and or the owner and the intermediary, and there's other like outer security, the information that we deliver to the set, and the inner part of it between owner and carrier. There's a lot to do with how are we sharing this information, like emails, Excel spreadsheet, what will happen there. And we should look after a protocol to exchange this information. Let's not forget that we have confidentiality agreements and there is a law to protect personal information. So we should take care of that when handling information. And in the outer information towards the authorities, they have said that this information will be classified and managed by SAT and will be classified according to different instances that should intervene. For instance, the supervision in highways. So up to this day, this is never ending. We will keep on having these work tables and all the work we'll do until November 30th, that is the time we have to implement this. We'll have work tables where we will discuss about security. And up to this day, we have at least published a national strategy in the Diario de la Federación. And this is considering like safety measures. What will public administration do when handling information? And
avanzando.
I think we're moving
Definitivamente,
forward. Definitely, according to the objectives that the authorities are looking for, one of them is to trace the merchandise that we are having, also to make it clear that there is no illegal merchandise on the roads. And it's a very complex phenomena. I think this won't end like from one day to the other. To be realistic, we needed to build a whole forum to talk about this, and not only for transportation, but like informality in the economics as a whole. So I think we should keep on moving forward to look to incorporate small carriers, because the biggest challenge is there. The small carriers, they need to be aware that we are giving the first steps towards digitalization. And one of the actions that the authorities told us to implement, no, that they will implement, is to develop an app in which, in any phone or tablet, drivers can document their loads. And that implies that there will be some data that he doesn't know at the moment, and we have gone to the extreme to wonder that in in payload industries should be analyzed like separately because every payload is different, so there's no like general solution.
You just touched on a point which, I mean, according to the segments, the need of a customer start changing, even from customer to customer. And for that, we require different solutions. DHL supply chain Mexico, the jewel of the crown in terms of transportation is called Perfect Lane. Perfect Lane is the net of networks where we consolidate products from different customers under different specifications, maybe even different temperatures and whatnot. One of the main doubts we have is when you load this onto a truck, Enrique, you know this very well. When you consolidate the load in a truck from 50 different customers, talking about the different senders, senders or receivers that could turn into 100 different receivers. And maybe let me put it this in a more critical way: 100 or 200 destinations, different destinations. So you move it from a point A, say Mexico City, and point B, I don't know, Monterrey, to break such consolidation and do 150 or 200 deliveries. In this example, how many CFDIs am I to do? Who has to do them? And when do I need to do them? Do I need to do this per distance or per sender or per carrier or per receiver? I mean, what has been the conversation about this in work tables? Well, since the model as we have it today, the bill of lading model, is a generic model. It does not contemplate very specific cases such as this one. The thing about consolidated load is something we have to deal with separately. Because what the model sets forth is issuing per shipment and issuing per distance every time the commodity is transported or connected to other units inside the whole logistic chain. It says you will have to do a CFDI for inbound with a bill of loading. Every time you transfer it or you connect it, you will have to cancel one and issue a new one every time it's loaded onto a new vehicle. The change in CFDI goes according to the change of vehicle, but can we agree on the fact that according to the consolidation model, it does not obey an interruption of the service? It is rather a matter of distribution strategy. Coming from a distribution center from Mexico to Monterrey, to follow on my previous example, is carried out in a unit of transportation, and it obeys my planning, it obeys my distribution design, and perhaps the type of unit utilized from the end distribution center to the delivery point is another one, because this is how we plan efficiently. Then we need to cancel the first CFDI and issue another one when... Yeah, that is my question. And let me change it around. What are we waiting for when it comes to defining it?
Well, the proposals that we have currently, let me address something here, that every service of packaging is something different, and not every consolidated service is packaging, so they are like very entwined. And what we propose is that the carrier that's delivering a service, instead of issuing a CFDI as an income, issues a CFDI as a transport. There's a substantial difference between these two. And doing the CFDI with a transport, not only when doing the service, it goes beyond that. In this model that I was mentioning, that he should issue a CFDI income every time it changes from vehicle, you'll have to change your CFDI every time your shipment changes. That's very complex. That would be super inefficient in operations, in administration, and you will fall in fiscal risks because you're talking about an invoice, which is an income CFDI, and if you cancel that, it's not that easy because there should be an authorization from your client for you to cancel a CFDI. And let me tell you that you cannot cancel it just like that because I am going to pay for a service that will transport my product from Mexico to Monterrey. I put names to this for it to be more clear. I will go in a truck from Mexico to Monterrey. I will change from vehicle in Monterrey because that's how we planned it, but I will have to pay for the previous service, so you shouldn't cancel it.
I think this is why the extension is important. What was the purpose of it? We're talking about consolidated payload, but we have determined more than 520 modalities of transportation. So each modality, each market niche requires a specific level of attention. We are looking for the specific attention to consolidated load and packaging. Like Ruben is specifying, not all packaging is considered a messenger delivery, and also not the other way around. But we have had some participations with transportation users. Today we are working with Correos Nacionales, participating with them to face this concern because as users they have raised awareness on what they have to do. What we will see in the following months is a conversation on the particularities of the 520 modalities of transportation. We are specifying a very specific one. Some others are very easy, like door-to-door services, faster to understand. But we will have to do them piece by piece. Each modality there. If I may compliment it there, your compliment. When it comes to the proposal we are coming up with, transportation CFDI, that's what we need. Reason number one, when it comes to consolidated payload, we've already notified the authority that each connection does not mean charging for an additional service. This is something we must be very clear on. On the operational side, this document makes you flexible. And what do I mean by this? Every time the merchandise comes from one connection to the other, what truck 2 has and what from when we have it from truck 2 to from truck 1 to truck 2 is carrying a shipment that's documented from the beginning, is checked in with an origin and destination. What we are presenting to the authority is what we have in the second truck is a transportation CFDI saying I have 50 packages, 50 shipments, but not replicating the merchandise here.
Ruben, and I have a doubt regarding this, and let me ask it. So the income CFDI, you mentioned destination. In this example that we were talking about, it has an origin in Mexico and it has a final destination, let's say it's Saltillo. And the transfer point is Monterrey. The income CFDI, when you should write down the destination, what should we put? Monterrey or Saltillo? Technically, it should be the final destination, Monterrey. So there's a couple of variants. There is a section for Q&A, and they say, how will you issue a CFDI, income CFDI, every time that there's more than one destination? And what it says is you should add as many intermediate points as we will have in this delivery in that same unit. Well, that is the question. Maybe not in that same unit or vehicle, maybe in some other vehicle, but you should declare it from the origin. And doing a CFDI transport every time that there's like a transfer, let's call it that way.
Very well. Enrique, unfortunately, we are running out of time. And before I pass the floor to our audience, I would like to wrap up with two questions. Based on this conversation, what are the most important challenges that you see as a chamber? Are these operational challenges, fiscal challenges, infrastructural, perhaps even training? What are the most important challenges that you envision? And also, what are you proposing to do in order to mitigate them? The most important challenge is on the operational side. At the end of the day, we need to remember that we sell something non-tangible. It's a service, and the operation becomes more and more of a headache. It is a fiscal control, yes, not just for transportation service, but also for our customers. So we need to find the best solution both for the authority and for us, at the same time as avoiding it from becoming a humdrum system of mobility. Given the geographical position of Mexico, it is very important for logistics and mobility. If this is a humdrum system and we make it easier, we will look for more alternatives in all of Latin America, and we have the pressure of being the spearhead. We have made it more sensitive for the authority. The SCT and Hacienda do not have the same definition on what we mean by control. The Ministry of Communications and Transportation got it better. They have been a main ally and they serve as a communication bridge. But we believe with arguments that sometimes are fed back by our own partners, we will achieve something good. And this will not be a general rule for all modes of transportation, but for each specification of the service we provide.
How far have we gone in these talks on the proposals you have? Well, first of all, we got an extension, so that's something good to have some time to one, so carriers and owners can adjust the scheme to have communication with the user and to see how they will interact with their sharing information. That's one. And two is to continue with the management, with managing income CFDIs. I think that is critical point. And if any given point we can succeed to make these like transport CFDI, maybe we can come up with, if you let me give an example, is it like, okay, we'll do an income CFDI. But due to the characteristics and the model of a CFDI like currently, that implies that I should have all the information previously, and also how much will I charge. So the challenge there would be to adjust or modify the model of the CFDI. What do I mean? It's like getting in a cab. When you get into a taxi, you have like an initial rate, like the very base rate. And you don't know how much will it be in the end. So we will propose to open an income CFDI that can be closed once the delivery is done and you know the amount that will be charged. So I think we need to adjust the model of the CFDI.
This sounds quite interesting, and we are just in time to pass the floor to our participants. We have questions we got from the panel. So, Claudia, Sergio, can you help us out here? Of course, Alex.
Yes, definitely. It is a very interesting subject. Personally, I have a lot of doubts, but. And we were wondering which question to choose because there are a lot, but let's see. The first question we have is for trucks of 1.5 tons, there is no permission from the Secretariat? And for the complement of the bill of loading, what's being done like in a general payroll?
Here, the rule 12719 has an application meant for federal roads. Today, it applies for all roads in the whole nation, both federal and state roads, even municipal roads. Related to the specific question, what has to do with the local payload is inside the rule. Perhaps they don't issue a bill of loading as such, but they are compelled to comply with a fiscal requirement, which is the complement, the CFDI. The authority has already analyzed the last mile. In this part, we will keep on working because the documentation, or at least the way in which the service is documented, has certain particularities and granularities. We should remain on the lookout for this subject. We are nowhere near the end. Many questions out there, and this is still open, an open question. Thank you very much. There is another question, very simple one. Can the bill of loading be created virtually?
That's one of the proposals that we have done to the authorities. We are limited by internet coverage, but this is one of the things that we are dealing with the authorities. What will happen with the primary sector where many times they don't have internet, for instance, in some rural areas?
Many of the characteristics of the operators of the infill load, to put it one way, sometimes they don't even know the commodities they are loading or the amount. What SAT is proposing for this application is precisely endowing the transporters with the opportunity of documenting digitally the moment they have internet connection. Excellent, thank you very much.
There's another question, maybe we talked about this already. With the new regulations, how will the bill of loading should be for consolidated cargo? Should we have a bill of loading for every company?
Yeah, it was mentioned during the conversation, and this is one of the most granular points we need to look at very specifically for consolidated payload. We're working on finding a more amicable control and not turning it into something to freak out about. It would be given a special treatment. Thank you very much.
And what will happen with rejections? How will we manage that? Do you need any kind of bill of loading or CFDI for this? I think that we should broaden the question a bit. Rejections could be like devolutions, yes. Also not delivered product or partially delivered, but that was not considered in the initial planning of the service. Yes, if you allow me to answer that. It's a very interesting subject. Devolutions. When it comes to the user, but when it comes to the user, it is very important to describe their merchandise and the quantities that they are being given and the quantities that they are rejecting. For inventory control, for instance, when you need to fiscalize like how much went in and how much was rejected, that's super important. For the SAA team, that's an important subject.
Maybe even we could talk about the conclusion of a service and then a new service starts. So perhaps there should be a new CFDI. Yes, because they are different when there is rejection or a reimbursement. What happens when, yeah, they would have to document a new segment of the service, but what matters here is that it was 10, I was given back 2, and they go back to the storage of the seller, to put it one way, correctly. And this arises a lot of questions in our customers.
Well, thank you very much for both of you, and Alex, thank you as well for participating, for your answers, for everything you've shared with us. Of course, there are a lot of doubts. There's an ongoing subject. It's still a negotiation, but we'll keep an eye on all these subjects. And it's great that we have some spare time to keep on discussing this.
Thank you, Claudia and Sergio. It is always a pleasure to share the stage here with you, like every year. And our star guests, Enrique and Hugo, thank you for being here. There's a lot of cloth to be cut, and we are running out of time. Just a few months to clarify this and many more other questions. I think you have a lot of work ahead of you, and the whole transportation sector is in the hands of the management you perform, especially to clarify how to comply with these rules and these norms. Thank you very much for being here with us at the panel. We know there are many questions still unsolved, but we will prepare in the following weeks, maybe even the next month. We will try to have a webinar with Kanakar and all the protagonists. We will invite our oversight body to see what other clarifications we could have, and I'm pretty sure in the media you will keep on hearing from us. Thank you for being with us. Have a lovely afternoon.
Sergio, thank you very much for inviting us, Alex, Claudia, and something which is very important. You have said we have a lot of questions, and 6 months ago we had even more questions. So something that's like a light at the end of the tunnel is that once we intervene with the Secretariat of Communication and Transportation, we see a light of communication, and this can be solved with a goodwill of both parties. And that bridge is there, so we came here very happy of the extension that we had last Friday, so we can like talk about all the specifics on this. And as we move forward, we will keep informing you and informing ourselves. We don't need to be worried about this. We need to work on this, and we'll keep on working.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you, Ruben. It was a pleasure. See you tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you for participating in this active session. So, this is the closure for the second day of activities in our DHL Transportation Forum 2021. I hope that you enjoyed everything that we shared just as we did.
We invite you to come with us at 9 a.m. to start with the activities of the third and last day of our event. Do not forget about sharing experiences and comments on the first and second day on your social media, and inviting your colleagues and friends to participate in tomorrow's activities. You will receive an email with a survey, and we kindly ask you to respond to take your comments into consideration for further editions of the event. And for Thank you very much, Sergio.